let's move on to another question then. All right, this is Kanishka. Hi, John and Glenn. What advice would you give to a hypothetical son or a very real daughter coming of age in a time when unrestricted pornographic content is just a finger's touch away? With the current trajectory of further commercialization and cultural promotion of sex work, it's clear that pornography will only become more pervasive in the world that we will inherit. While pornography has positive attributes for society, I am scared by the lack of mature advice for individuals on dealing with porn. As a part of the first generation with this access to internet porn, I have firsthand experience of its negative effects on myself and my peers. On the individual level, there is porn addiction and increased fetishism. On a societal level, and much more worrying to me, many young men choose to not go out of their comfort zones to pursue relationships. They are instead content to passively wait for a relationship while they satisfy their biological urges with porn. What advice would you give to the next generation of men and women who will live in a world where the interaction between the sexes is forever changed by porn? Well, Kanishka, I'm going to let John respond. It's a tough question. You ought to know, at least I speak for myself, I'm not an expert on the subject here, and I'm in a way flattered, but also kind of dismayed that you think I have some wisdom to offer on this question. But John can speak for himself.
No, I'm a little, my girls aren't old enough for this to be an issue quite yet. I'm not a porn person, never have been. That doesn't work for me. I just don't. Well, what I'm really thinking is, remember all the noise that was made about pornography, and I think it was not just the kind that you could buy at the store, but not just Playboy and Penthouse, but other stuff. There was a whole lot of talk about pornography and its effect on relations between men and women among radical feminists in the 80s. Like an awful lot of the talk about feminism from Andrea Dworkin and from Catherine McKinnon was about pornography. I was always a little perplexed. I was thinking, how important is pornography as opposed to other things going on? But apparently it was. And I'm way out of my lane here. But I'm under the impression that nobody ever proved that this pornography had a whole lot to do with making the world go around. Like what did it create that there hadn't been before? And so, I learned from one friend of a friend about 15 years ago, and I don't partake of such things, but I learned that pornography is much more easily available online than I had reason to think. And folks, I mean it. It's not my bag. I've never gone to look, but he showed me the screen where you can just press a button. And I thought, oh, so now you don't have to get a magazine or something. And he was saying, yeah. So I don't know how new this is. And I hear now and then that this online pornography affects relations between young men and women, but does it? Like, I guess I'm thinking about my students at Columbia. Is there something different about the way they're having sex than anything that I've known in my life when I was a teenager? I genuinely don't know. I mean, to be honest, I'm thinking that my older daughter can probably now press a button and see something. And yes, I can put certain guards on, but eventually that's not going to work. Yes, she's going to see something that I couldn't. I don't know what effect that's going to have on her. I genuinely don't know. I'm a little naive about this. My inclination is that it won't matter, but maybe I need to think more about it. I don't know.
Yeah, I think you do. I find your naivete charming in a way, kind of sweet, because all you have to do is go to Pornhub.com. I mean, it's not hard to find, man. It really is not hard to find. And I'm not making any representations here about my own consumption habits of pornography, but I do know a fair bit more about it than John does. And it's very easy to find.
Do you have to pay for it? Do you pay for it, or is it just sitting there?
Well, if you want to get inside the room where the quote unquote good stuff is, you have to pay. But if you're just surfing, there's a lot that'll just pop up. I mean, if you go to these sites, the ads will be, and the teaser trailers and whatnot will be enough to get a kid excited, who's going through puberty and whatnot. And it's very easy to get. Everybody's got a phone, and everybody's got a connection to the web, and it's just everywhere. And in fact, a former colleague of mine, Jesse Shapiro is his name, a very great economist who's at Harvard. He used to be at Brown. I like him a lot, and he works on media subjects, economics of media in the broadest sense. And he studied internet content, and he told me that if you just measure it by the amount of volume of stuff that people are downloading, porn is like half the internet. It's
I've heard
everywhere. It's everywhere. You need a child psychologist or somebody who really knows what they're talking about to address the question of the adverse developmental effects of pornography consumption by adolescents. I'm not qualified to address that question. But I see the concern. And I've heard it given voice to in other venues that, guys masturbate, basically, and they satisfy their sexual urges through these fantasy flights where they go to a site, they get these images of people having sex, and it arouses them, and they have their ejaculation, and they deal with their urgings in that way. And that's the sex life of apparently no small number of individuals. And the idea that way of responding to the promptings of nature could distort how it is that boys and girls, young men and women interact with each other is certainly plausible to me. I mean, I give one example. No means yes, and yes means anal. No means yes, and yes means anal. That was at a college campus. I don't remember which one. This is probably going back 20 years. A chant from a drunken fraternity party in the face of people, Me Too people saying, no means no. No means yes. Yes means anal. Where'd the anal come from? It came from porn. I don't know the answer to this questioner's question because I'm not qualified, Kanishka. But I can understand why it would be of a concern. And we were asked what to do about it. How do I know what to do about it? This is parenting 101. How do you talk to your kids about dangers in the world, temptations, lures, snares, delusions, dead ends that are out there waiting to entrap you? And you have to navigate it. And your father, your mother will not be there to make those decisions for you about how you deal with your time and whatnot. I mean, there is one kind of answer to this, and it's spiritual. It refers to our convictions as if we are religious believers of one kind or another, or even if we're a-religious or whatever the moral code might be, how living a dignified life challenges us. And the Bible says, don't spill your seed on the ground, or words to that effect, is an admonition against masturbation. And of course, to argue against masturbation in the modern day makes one sound like an idiot or, a nutcase. On the other hand, what would a deeply satisfying relationship to my sexuality require of me? Saving myself for meaningful interaction with another human being as opposed to dissipating, et cetera, could be a kind of argument you could make to a kid, but you need a framework. You need an ethical, moral framework around such an argument in order for it to take, I think. Parenting has gotten harder in the 21st century, a lot harder, because kids are carrying the world, including the world of pornography, in their pockets.
All right, I'm going back a little bit. I'm not that untainted, but I'm still not fully understanding. When I was a teenager, there were the magazines, and somebody always had a copy of one of them, or your father had them, and so teenage boys would see them. My father had a stash of porn videos that I discovered when I was about 14 or 15. And me and my buddies watched all of them many, many times over. and were quite taken by them.
Excuse me,
And
your dad didn't know that you were watching them.
I don't think he ever knew, because we would do it when he wasn't around. And then there were these tacky little books that you could get at department stores and things. It was the
Yeah.
Beeline series, and there
Yeah.
were these stupid little porn novels. And I will openly admit that when I was 15 or 16, I bought several of them and shared them with my friends, and we used to quote the lines. So yeah, I had that experience even before the internet. Now, of course, I didn't have 1,000 of those books. I didn't
Right.
have a library of these films, but what I do know is that I never had any sense that what was going on in any of this had a whole lot to do with real life. It was just a kind of entertainment. Nor did I learn about what anal sex was from them. It was just around. It's what people talk about. Um, I'm not quite sure what the harm is, although I've read here and there that there's something about the modern amount of porn that affects what men expect, et cetera. But I haven't followed that literature closely.
Well, before we leave the subject, you mentioned it, not forget that the feminists in the 80s and onward who were inveighing against pornography were motivated by protection of the dignity of women. And the idea that in appealing to the basest of male sexual instincts and in presenting women in a posture of easy availability and so on, it uh, fostered a attitude toward women of disrespect and contempt and so on that rose to the level of causing some very serious people to question whether First Amendment protections ought to be extended to this kind of expression. So, I mean, there is something there, just like there's something there with prostitution. As an economist, my knee jerk reaction to objections to prostitution is consenting adults. It's a transaction. Somebody has something to sell, somebody wants to buy it. They didn't hurt me by making the trade. Why should I have anything to say about it? On the other hand, as one might imagine, the institution of marriage could be undermined by the widespread embrace as normative of prostitution as a way of, et cetera, et cetera. And what women are being taught and what men are being taught about the role of women and the dignity of women is, I think, arguably undermined by the widespread endorsement of prostitution as a, matter of fact transaction. So it becomes a harder problem once you take into account the spillover effects on the culture of the normalization of certain attitudes about sex and so on. I think I just wanted to mention that because I don't want listeners to think we're unmindful of the danger to women. Put that in quotes, put danger in quotes. But some people, I think, plausibly are concerned about